The highest inflation since the 1980s is making a holiday budgeting more complicated for folks. It does millions of first middle-class families this year. A poll last month found nearly half of Americans have less in savings than they did just a year ago. The poll also found 42% plan to spend less on gifts this season and only 8% plan to spend more. The National Retail Federation says overall holiday spending hasn't slowed just yet, but many families are making sacrifices to buy presents for their loved ones. Meanwhile, in a Gallup poll this month, more than half of Americans said rising prices have caused financial hardships for their household, and 13% say that hardship is, quote, severe. Well, meantime, a nasal spray used to treat opioid overdoses could be available over the counter by early next year. That's according to its drug maker. And today, Mandy Gaither has more on why some believe this could be a game changer in the fight against deaths due to overdose.
It's an important weapon in the fight against opioid overdose deaths in the U.S.
Naloxone is a medication that is saving lives in my community and in my hospital every day.
Narcan is the brand name version of naloxone. It's used to reverse an opioid overdose. The drug maker says the nasal spray has now been granted priority review by the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, which means it could be available over the counter by the end of March.
Currently, Narcan is available without a prescription in all 50 states, but every state has its own set of policies that can be confusing, and that kind of confusion is exactly what we do not want.
In some states, Narcan is placed behind the counter, meaning a person would have to talk to a pharmacy employee to get it. Last year, there were more than 107,000 estimated drug overdose deaths in the U.S., according to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. The agency says synthetic opioids accounted for most of the deaths.
Narcan is very simple to use. It is safe. It is effective. It's something that all of us can carry in our pocket in case we come across someone who's experiencing an overdose.
If approved by the FDA, the drug maker says Narcan would be the first 4-milligram naloxone nasal spray available over the counter in the U.S.
Now, the FDA signaled back in November that it would support companies to submit applications to make naloxone available also over the counter. Well, switching gears now, NASA's Orion spacecraft successfully splashed down just off the coast of Baja California Sunday afternoon. That's after flying around the moon on a history-making test flight. The Artemis 1 mission comes to a successful end after more than 3 weeks and nearly 240,000 miles traveled. Isabel Rosales reports.
Good descent rate, 500 feet. Splashdown.
NASA's Orion spacecraft making an ocean splashdown after a 25-and-a-half-day mission around the moon. The historic Artemis 1 test flight aimed to test out harsh environments of deep space and to demonstrate the capsule could make a safe return back into Earth's atmosphere.
It was confident, but it was tense because there were two big things that had to happen today.
Temperatures around the
First of all, the heat shield had to work, and it worked perfectly. And then the parachutes had to work.
And we're on main.
And they did perfectly.
During the test mission, no astronauts were on board. Only a few mannequins were used to gather data. The mission comes to a successful end after 4 delayed launch attempts.
We're going back to the moon, but this time not to just stay there and come back.
Next up, NASA plans to use the data collected on this mission to choose a crew for the Artemis 2, which could take off in 2024. And then NASA aims to send astronauts back to the moon in 2025, putting the first woman and first person of color on the lunar surface.
We are on our path to getting that base on the moon, to getting the understanding we need to go on to Mars, and doing the science that's front and center here in our program.
I'm Isabel Rosales reporting.
And Sunday marks 50 years since humans last walked on the moon, an achievement completed by the Apollo 17 crew. Well, in other news, an actual buried treasure has been found at the bottom of Norway's largest lake. Researchers found a downed ship believed to be from between the 1300s to 1800s, I should say. Somehow, despite the passage of time, the craft managed to stay in almost perfect condition. The discovery was made while the Norwegian Defense Research Establishment was leading a mission that inspected parts of the lake that's a source of water for about 100,000 residents. Officials say the ship appears to be built using a Norse technique, which was common during the Viking